Playing Persephone by C. Louise Williams. I opened my eyes. Just beyond the forest edge stood an old oak tree, warped by years of unrelenting gales and heavy rain. I stared vacantly, enchanted by its terrifying shape, and felt my body raise itself from the ground and follow the short path to the tree, whose roots lay like rabbit snares along the sodden trail. My feet pressed down into the damp earth beneath me, and I savored the feeling. Chills raced up my legs, a welcome shock after such a violent summer storm. The leaves of other, younger trees swayed carelessly above my head as I sauntered through to the meadow of the gnarled old oak, acorns glistening dangerously as their pointed tips sought out the bare underside of my heel. I couldn't help but smile, listening to the branches above me tapping gently against each other. Shrill staccato claps, shooing away the blackbirds who dared to stay in their nests despite the roaring thunder this morning. A song caught in my throat, and I found myself humming some unknown lullaby as I entered the meadow and approached the tree. There was a little daffodil, nestled comfortably in a tuft of soft, withering grass, and taken as I was by its soft white leaves and its curious golden center, I plucked it and placed it in my hair. I chuckled quietly to myself and continued humming my strange lullaby. I ran my fingers across the rough bark of the grand oak, walking slowly around its trunk. A warm gust of wind brushed against my neck, whistling through the wild curls of hair I had. I ran my fingers across the rough bark of the grand oak, walking slowly around its trunk. A warm gust of wind brushed against my neck, whistling through wild curls of hair as I climbed onto a low-hanging limb and lay flat against it, the thick, jagged pieces of wood nudging against my cheek. I closed my eyes. I opened my eyes. My linen dress flapped effortlessly in the balmy breeze, and I let my arm fall over the side of the tree limb, my fingers dancing slowly in the humid air, as though touching lightly the surface of still water, painting faces in the ripples I might have made. I hummed my lullaby, and my eyes again began to flutter closed. Suddenly, the thick branch beneath me cracked and shuddered, and I leapt from the limb back into the grass below, my heart pounding in my chest. From afar, however, all was as before, and the tree, though seemingly ancient, betrayed no signs of weakness. I stepped back up to my wooden perch and ran my hand between its joint to the tree. Nothing had changed, which was certainly strange. I became aware of the silence surrounding me, the stillness of the air, and the tender shoots of wild grasses and flower buds beside my feet. I backed up slowly, putting a clammy palm to my forehead and brushing my fingers absently over my hair. The daffodil I had placed behind my ear tumbled quickly out of my reach and was swept up by the wind, which had renewed its immense strength. A great roll of thunder quickened my pulse, and I suddenly yearned for the comfort and small measure of protection which my little house gave me, but, entranced by the cool, waxy petals of the daffodil, I ran instead after the devilish blossom, which had fled to the other side of the oak tree. It lay unscathed in a heap of dried, broken twigs, and I rushed underneath the low branches of the oak to retrieve it. I frowned, picking it up gingerly and dusting off its bell-shaped center, placing it securely in my hair. "There," I chimed, smiling once more. Another clap of thunder interrupted my return to contented bliss, and I moved back to the dirt path's opening, sure that soon it would be flooded and rendered useless until the brewing storm had passed. "Wait," a voice seemed to whisper from a hollow in the old tree. I stopped at once, my muscles suddenly tense with fear, and I willed myself to remain facing the trail. Rough fingertips grazed slowly over my shoulder, and I shuddered, my breath becoming shallow and ragged with each elongated moment that passed. A hush fell over the meadow, and I felt my breath stop in my throat. "Miss, did you drop this?" A rough, quiet voice whispered, the hand on my shoulder twirling briefly and a daffodil appearing in its fingertips. I started to turn around, but was stopped when the man behind me snapped, "Don't." I shuddered again and didn't move, unsure what to do. "Please, I don't want you to look at me just yet." Not a moment later, I felt his arms snake around my waist, and I looked longingly at the entrance to the meadow, afraid and determined to escape from him. "Close your eyes. Tell me what you remember about me," he asked, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I swallowed, trying to keep my breathing steady until his grip softened. I began. "I'm sorry, but I don't know you." "Corey," he whispered in my ear, and I could feel his cool breath trailing down the nape of my neck. I inhaled sharply, and immediately my head was filled with the smell of cinnamon, star anise, and ash. The odors overwhelmed my senses, and I felt my knees go weak. I fell to my knees, and the man didn't miss a beat, kneeling down with me and hugging my body closer to his. I could feel that he was thin, not sickly thin, but slender, as I leaned against him, trying to find my mental footing. "Corey," he repeated softly. "Do you remember the color of my hair, Corey?" The scent hit me again, and I moaned softly, inadvertently, and felt his chest move as he chuckled. You're... I started to turn around again, brushing my hand over the daffodil in my hair. He chuckled and held me still. I knew that I knew him, but his face escaped my mind. "Your hair is the color of ash," I whispered, nodding my head as I grasped at the weeds beneath us. A blackbird flew in front of my face, and I shrieked, throwing myself across the grass and wildflowers to shield my face. Suddenly, I was very keenly aware that I had thrown myself from the man's arms, and at once I was on my feet, sprinting from him. I tried to throw the daffodil from my hair, but its stem had become tangled in my dark, curly locks, so I let it be, though somewhere inside of me I knew I couldn't escape this man until the flower was no longer attached to me. I was almost at the opening of the meadow, to the trail which would lead me home, when the young man, appeared before me and grabbed me as I ran into his arms, his appearance so sudden that I couldn't turn around in time. His eyes were a pale blue color. No, they were simply pale, white like the full moon. I could barely tell where his irises and his sclera separated. His hair was dark, not like ash, but like obsidian, and it fell over his alarmingly colorless eyes. His skin, ashen. Although my eyes told me this thin young man should be weak, that I should be able to escape, finally seeing him had floored me. An immense power seemed to permeate from his very being, and despite myself, I felt drawn to that power. It was familiar and exhilarating. "What is my name, Corey?" he demanded, and I stammered, unable to find my voice. I made a feeble attempt to free myself from his arms, but all my focus had been lost as I fell to this spell his eyes seemed to cast. Still, I couldn't think of his damn name. The question rang like silver bells in my ear, some ancient melody that I'd heard before. Time and time again, I'd heard it. But why did the answer elude me? Thunder cracked in the distance, the boisterous shock breaking my trance. The dark-haired man moved his face closer to mine, and I could feel his lips just barely graze my own. "Come on," he taunted playfully. "What's my name?" I remembered finally, my lips curling into a smile as the inextinguishable breath of life again erupted in me and bound me to his touch. "Death," I whisper. "My own perfect, impossible